Hi, members. Welcome to CISO platform. CISO panel discussions on top breaches in cybersecurity in 2025. Our knowledge partner for this session is FireCompass, an AI-powered autonomous pen testing and continuous automated red teaming CART solution. For those who are new, CISO platform is an exclusive network for senior security professionals of 40,000 plus members. You can learn more at CISOplatform.com. Today's panelists are Sachin Deodhar. He's a former CTO in a government intelligence environment. He has deep experience in adversary capability and defensive posture. We have Matthew Harris. He's the Director of Security at Specialty Dental Brands, leads security outcomes in a real operating business. We have Matthew Rosenquist. He's the CISO and cybersecurity strategist at Mercury Risk and Compliance, board level risk translation and incident leadership. And we have Maril, Vernon. She is a CISSP, Field Offensive Security Officer at FireCompass. We will continue the session followed by audience Q&A. So drop in your questions in the chat. Today's moderator is Maril. Thank you so much, Maril, for joining us. Over to you.
Thanks so much, Preetha. Yeah, we're excited to be here today. We've got some very exciting and spicy topics we are excited to cover. So for today's conversation, just to level set, we are deliberately using a very broad definition of breach. So not just a confirmed data exfiltration or point where any data actually left the environment. Breaches can be breaches of trust, security, availability, or control of the app tool or company. So that's going to include supply chain failures, identity abuse, and outages with system impact that the general public tended to notice. So with no further ado, we are going to get right into the first one. So the first thing we're going to be discussing is breach patterns in 2025 versus prior years, because last year we saw a very, very unique style of breaches than we've tended to see in previous years. I feel like everything in previous years was really hardware-based, really protocol-based. Getting initial access was pretty straightforward. Now you've got all kinds of methods of authentication bypass and identity abuse, and hackers are getting smarter and smarter and smarter out there. So Sachin, I want to go to you first. What patterns and micro trends have you noticed when it came to the most notable breaches we saw? What failed first, identity, process, or visibility? And like what looks new, but actually is tale as old as time, tradecraft?
Okay, thanks, Maril, for the question. So 2025 has been a pretty interesting year. So personally, what I've observed, either through my direct experience as well as doing research on the prevailing trends and attack patterns and typologies and so on, one of the key trends that I have noticed is that the attacks in 2025 and perhaps maybe even 2024 are driven less by elite actor capability, which tended to be the case in previous years, in the previous decade almost, and more by mid-tier operators leveraging artificial intelligence and automation to increase scale and sophistication of the attack. So that's one of the first trends I noticed. The second is it's perimeter exploits are on the decline. However, identity, SaaS, and cloud control plane attack vectors are taking precedence. Abuse of identity privileges, abuse of cloud assets and resources. It's kind of taking over from the traditional perimeter-based attack scenarios that we would normally see. The third is, I've seen living off the land, yes, but with adaptive evasion, again, leveraging artificial intelligence, situational awareness, agents taking note of the situation and the environment that they are in and adapting their TTPs quite very dynamically in a way to be able to remain under the detection thresholds or deterministic thresholds, as I like to call them. And the last one I'm seeing is again around the increase in scale and sophistication of the attacks. Maybe until 2023, we just spoke about a theoretical possibility and some research projects that dealt with using AI in its various forms to either evade detection or to generally increase the scale and sophistication of the attacks. In 2025, we're starting to see the monetization of these techniques by threat actors, not necessarily the elite ones. So I think these are 3 or 4 trends that I've seen, which are borne out in case studies and examples that hopefully we'll talk about in the coming in the session.
Yeah, you're definitely right. The speed, scale, and sophistication that attacks have now has enabled and definitely lowered the barrier to entry and the bar of sophistication for threat actors. Mr. Matt Harris, what about you? Enterprise execution failures. What's your perspective?
Sure. So off the top of my head, I mean, just looking at how things have gone through and actually progressed, is we're seeing more of a trend going toward legitimate applications, such as log me in, things along those lines that are actually, I mean, legitimately signed. So it's going away from just the standard way where it was just a base phishing attack to where we're actually transitioning into that. And so it's very difficult to go through catch. And I mean, this also leverages against, well, we can go down a rabbit hole with this one, but things like shadow IT, things along those lines. But you will need to go through and establish a baseline of what's normal within your environment. I mean, we can definitely take this topic quite down, but I know we're short on time as is. So,
Yeah, I appreciate
yeah.
the concise responses. But yeah, definitely point it there. All right, Matthew Rosenquist, bring us home. Initial impressions on again, what was permitted to go wrong, where enterprises tended to fail, why some of these trends are different than trends that we've seen in previous years.
Well, I think we need to look at it at a strategic level. In 2025, we saw a lot of the very similar tactics and attacks simply amplified, automated, increased in speed. By the end of 2025, for example, in social engineering attacks, we saw the influence of AI come in, typically an LLM. So it's still at a high level, but AI was, impactful in about 80% of those social engineering attacks. We do see an up level. The two primary threat actor archetypes are still nation states and cyber criminals. And again, the bar has lowered because of the tools and availabilities. But we still see attacks against vulnerabilities in technical systems, in software and cloud environments and architecture. We're still seeing social engineering attacks being amplified. So a lot of what we've seen in the past continue to move forward. Some of the very biggest, most impactful attacks of 2025 were actually conducted by nation states or sponsored by nation states through different various cyber criminal activities. So the impacts are still big by the big players and those seeking personal financial gain. The other thing we have to look at is the behavioral change within the scope of the victims. We saw a lot more companies refuse to pay extortion, ransomware, and that had cascading impacts, right? And that changes the dynamics from the attackers. The attackers just don't go away, they amplify, right? They're
They do.
gonna,
They get more creative. Listen, we're not going to quit.
yes, yes, we're not gonna walk
Yeah, if
away from a
ransoming you
bag
all
of
was
money.
not a lucrative industry, we would have quit already, but it still works, which is why we're
Yes,
still
it's
out there
worth
doing it.
it. So you
It
have
is
an
worth it.
escalation of attacks and damages. So there is, from the victim's perspective, you've got management going, okay, what are we going to do? You've got the security folks thinking, okay, we've got to figure this out ahead of time and then be able to respond. So you've now got a change of processes and expectations across the board. And then just, for good fun, you start having regulations take effect in 2025, right? If you're a publicly held company in the United States, now you have to report it, a
Yeah.
material impact within 4 days. Congratulations. How does that
But
change?
that 4 days kind of becomes arbitrary when it took you 6 to 9 months to find the damn thing in the first place, right? It's like, oh my God, you didn't know you've notified me quick enough, but dang, that took you a long time. Okay,
Don't
let's
panic. It's four
segue
days
us into
from
our
once
next
you
topic.
realize it's material. So, but you have to report it. So
You
there's
do
all
have to
these
report.
things that are pushing pressure on security, on management, on shareholders, on the boards. It was a very interesting year.
Well, I allotted extra time for this question we didn't use, so let me just slip this in real quick. Matt alluded to this earlier, and Matthew kind of capitalized on it. So the attack surface has changed, right? Remember, like 4 or 5 years ago, when cloud was the wild, wild west frontier that nobody really understood, and it was sprawling faster than we could all control it and quantify it and mitigate it. Do you guys feel like AI is that new frontier, or like you're saying, is it still cloud and still social engineering? Like I said, tale as old as time, tradecraft that we just still can't seem to mitigate against. What do you see as being the
I'll
frontier
jump
of
into
Merrill,
this one real
oh, sorry,
quick. So much of this, we've seen that everything is now as a service. So ease of use is it's so much easier to go through and push this through for whatever. As Matthew alluded to, you don't have to be good. You don't have to be what you used to have to be because everything you just pay a little bit and you've got an exploit right there at your fingertips. So and with AI coming into it, I mean, we've seen so much that's evolved with that so quickly. And there's so many different platforms out there that are going through, whether you're talking some that go through when they're not being used, they go through and do cyber warfare against each other to go through and train, or where
Mhm.
that's being used as to go through and train not just the uh, red team side, but also blue team to go through and actually defend, come up with exploits, whatever. And so it's definitely gone through and progressed much faster than honestly many of us have. The attacker just has to be right once. We got to be right
Agree.
100% of the time. For
Yeah, they
those
can
of us
afford
on
to
blue
spray
team.
and pray because they just got to get lucky once.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So Shane, you next, then we'll move on.
Okay. So hopefully this will, it's a bit of a nuanced point. So I'm trying to articulate it as best as I can. So, it hopefully answers, is a response to your question, Merrill. So for example, I mean, one of the things that I'm seeing is so to answer your question, it's all of the above, meaning it's artificial intelligence aiding attacks on all of these different types of infrastructures. Yet, but how, right? It's I call it the nonlinearity phenomena, right? In the past decade, we have seen artificial intelligence used and leveraged by attackers, but in a very fragmented way. So if you look at the different stages of the attack kill chain, you would see artificial intelligence playing a role in one or more of those stages of the kill chain in very specific ways. But what you now have is AI being the glue that holds everything together and then enables the entire attack kill chain or almost the entire attack kill chain. And that allows you for a greater degree of autonomy in execution of the attack kill chain through the attack kill chain, through all of the tactics in the kill chain, all the way from initial access to impact. And that is something that's quite worrying because it kind of it's almost like the cyber equivalent of the Turing test. Can you distinguish between a universal Turing machine and a human being in terms of by looking at the responses? So if you look at what the AI is capable of spitting out in terms of attacks and attack kill, the kill chain capability, it's getting eerily similar to how human operators would execute an attack. So going by my government experience, I'm seeing the attack patterns, which are AI enabled, to be very, very similar to, frighteningly similar to the way our operators would work in
Yeah,
offensive
it's getting better.
cybersecurity
We're
missions.
getting closer. I wouldn't say we're completely there yet, but we're definitely getting a lot
Oh, we're getting
closer.
closer. Yes, yes.
Yeah, if there's one thing defenders listening to this take away, it's that I want you to understand that there are threats to AI, there are threats from AI, and there are AI assisted threats, and they are not all the same. Stop just looking for threats to your AI and start understanding where your AI assisted threats come from. All right, so we talked about how it's a brave new world out there. It's a whole new landscape of style and sophistication of attack. So let's talk about how attackers are exploiting these failures at scale. Automation, AI, and modern tooling, beautiful segue, the role they should have played and the role they can play in future breaches. So, the primary breaches I'm thinking we're probably going to reference here might be the Salesforce ecosystem token abuse, SharePoint tool shell exploit, Fortinet firewall, etc. So, I'm going to start with Matt Rosenquist here. So, talk to me about defender lag and speed and where AI automation and tooling were supposed to help us in the cases of these breaches, but where it fell short.
Well, it will, right? AI is a tool. Unfortunately, the attackers maintain the initiative. They get to embrace AI tools and leverage it for their purposes much faster than us defenders do. So they get a few extra steps ahead in this race, and they're using it. They're using it for social engineering. They're using it for vulnerability detection. They're using it for exploitation generation. They're using it for attack orchestration, just like Sachin said. It's across that entire kill chain, their entire process. And what AI does for the attackers is it allows them to increase their effectiveness, right? The social engineering gets more realistic. The vulnerability detection gets faster, right? So they get better, but they also get to increase the pace or the severity, right, of what they're doing. So they get to exploit and detect a lot more technical vulnerabilities. They get to send out a lot more phishing attacks. And typically there was tension there. You could either spray and pray, or you could have a focused attack and do a little bit better. AI takes that away and gives them the opportunity to do both. Now, we're going to get that benefit. We're going to need that benefit because we have an elevated number of attacks and they're more effective, right? And they're adapting faster. But we don't just get to grab AI tools, right? We have to make
No.
sure that they're quality, that they're not going to cause impact themselves, right? We need to wait for our vendors to integrate those into the tools
Well,
and
I
products and
have said this for
services.
years. I have said for years, you know who doesn't have all of our procurement limitations and legal's got to redline this and we got to sign these MNDAs and you don't have 3 years of experience or 5 years of, you know who's just giving anybody a chance, giving them any tool they want and letting them take a stab at it? The threat actors. They're just
Yes,
the more at bats they get,
wild
the
and
more likely they are to be
crazy.
successful. Yeah.
They have that advantage. Now, I do predictions every year, and I put this on my predictions for 2026. We are going to get the AI tools that we need. It's just going to be about 3 quarters from now.
Oh,
So the
well, look,
attackers are going to maintain
I
that
want it now.
advantage.
I want it now. We're still getting
I
great.
want all the shiny bits too, but
I know.
it's tough out there because we've got all the big players adding in AI features, but we've also got these incredible, startups and small and medium innovators that are coming up. Who's the best? We don't know yet.
Oh,
We don't
we
even
don't
know
know
what
yet. We won't have
the
that
threats
until
are going to be. So
yeah.
AI is a tool, and then Sachin also mentioned, and Matt did as well, that AI is also a vulnerability in of itself. As we
It is.
rush and every company out there is trying to implement AI, security is it's an afterthought. So
Yeah.
they're implementing systems that have vulnerabilities that we don't know, and they're bypassing our traditional security controls for prevention and detection.
And I feel like
So
everyone
it's
who's been in cyber
crazy.
longer than 6 years is crying right now because these were the same conversations we had 6 years ago. Like you can listen to any
Yes.
cyber podcast and they're echoing what Matt says. Okay, Sachin, you next. Attacker workflows. How have they changed? How are they more sophisticated? And to Matt's point, what can defenders do to try and stay up with the adaptation speed? Because I feel like cyber resilience has multiple pillars and everyone's in that thwart pillar
Mhm.
or looking at containment maybe next. No one is paying attention to the adaptation pillar, and that's the pillar where we learn and we get better. So how are attackers doing it, and how can defenders do it?
Right. I mean, most discussions I tend to hear about how artificial intelligence is used in offensive cyber operations tend to focus on two main themes, right? One is, leveraging generative AI and large language models to increase scale, sophistication, speed of initial access attempts, through spear phishing and other. I think Matthew just mentioned that earlier. Or they talk about creating evasive payloads that are harder to detect, either at disk write time if they do write to the disk at all, or at execution time or runtime. But I think let me take you on a really really short but a comprehensive journey through the attack kill chain and how AI works, right? In each of these. Very short, right? So
Definitely.
first is in the recon targeting phase and attack path discovery phase. Obviously, this is something that we are aware of, right? We have attackers using LLMs, automated recon frameworks to ingest OSINT, breach dumps, GitHub, SaaS metadata, cloud blueprints, or rather cloud footprints, and then prioritize exploitable identities and trust relationships, not simply CVEs, right? That would be the
Mm-hmm.
traditional way of doing things. And then you have
Louder.
automation that will build attack paths, right? Yeah, attack graphs in real time. For example, which identity, which API token, which service account gives me the maximum blast radius and reach inside the network? These are the types of questions that these AI agents are tasked with, and then they will develop an attack graph which will kind of be compatible with that attack approach or philosophy. So this is something that we're seeing in the initial stages of the attack. Now, further down, post exploitation, right? Once you have an initial foothold, you have automated chaining of attacks, something that I alluded to earlier. For example, credential abuse, followed by token replay, followed by lateral SaaS access, followed by cloud control plane actions without any human pauses or human interventions. So this can happen fast and it can happen almost autonomously. Of course, there may or may not be a human in the loop, but typically there is. But the idea is it's almost like a Tesla full FSD, right? You do expect the driver to have his hands on the wheel, but not necessarily maneuver the car. It's kind of on autopilot. Then the next thing you need to do in a attack kill chain is a kind of be evasive, stealthy, persistent, right? The P in the APT. There you have what we are seeing now is modern attacks, and I think the other panelists have alluded to this earlier. Rarely now drop malware. Instead, what they do is they abuse admin tools, SaaS features, CI/CD runners, backup systems, IAM roles, cloud APIs to essentially get what they want by just living off not the land, but I call it living off the environment that they themselves in. Right, and then furthermore, once you reach the deep recesses of a network, and you are about to hopefully achieve domain dominance and establish a permanent presence there, or possibly do a subterfuge sabotage type of an incident like ransomware, what you then need is evasion. And you don't need evasion simply, which is static evasion against a set of security controls. But the idea is to make it more realistic. The environment changes dynamically as you encounter it. And there are human operators on the other side, the SOC teams, and the people who are responsible for defending our organization that are going to take action when they see an adversary in their midst. So how do the adversaries react? They do what we call adaptive evasion, right? And also detection shaping. The detection shaping is very interesting. So essentially, what the idea is to create alert-aware intrusions, but that still deliberately stay below the detection deterministic thresholds. So they never raise the alarm to the level where the SOC teams actually takes interventionist actions like network isolating an endpoint or a server, but it remains well within the threshold. In India, there is this mythological concept called Lakshman Rekha. It's a line that shall not be crossed, and it comes from the Indian mythology Ramayana. So it's essentially they're doing the equivalent of that. They go close to the line, they don't cross it. It doesn't create any large interventions from the SOC teams and the other defense teams on the other side. It definitely does not become an incident, and the attacker is still able to remain persistent inside the environment, achieve more strategic objectives. So that is
God, these definitions don't
run
hold
down.
I agree. So I don't really think it's attacker creativity that's really evolved all that much because like with ransomware, again, most of these kill chains are identical to traditional kill
Yes.
chains right up until the deploy
The
payload,
last
encrypt,
stage. Yeah.
delete
Yeah.
backups. Yeah. Really, I feel like what it is that automation has allowed attackers to fail faster and pivot faster.
Yes.
So they can attempt these things and I feel like the second a threat actor actually actively interacts with the system, from me, when I was a red teamer, I was like, okay, the clock has started, countdown has started. They could discover me at any time now. I know I have very limited time to get in here, try and evade defenses, try and fly low and slow. Have a goal and I need to get there before I get locked out. So first thing you do is delete your initial callbacks and spin up extra callbacks and protocols, etc. But I mean, again, whether or not that's going to get discovered or caught, they're allowed to pivot faster because of the speed and availability that automation does provide them.
And
Okay.
one small nuance point here to something that you
Yeah.
just said, to pivot faster. The difference is now it doesn't need necessarily a human operator. You could actually
No.
have an AI agent that actually decides that it is time to pivot.
I mean,
And
ours doesn't. Ours doesn't. It does it all by itself. So I
yeah,
agree with you.
sorry.
It's that
Anyway,
orchestration. It's very, very powerful because it
It's
enables you to move at speed once you're inside.
yeah.
Yeah, even if it didn't have the sophistication, even if it was just the scale and automation, that's still so powerful because it enables a single individual and is a force multiplier so much. And you know what's crazy? You know what's crazy? Thanks for doing my job for me, guys. Because when I'm on a sales call telling people how it's a force multiplier, they don't want to hear it. But when we tell them it's a threat actor force multiplier, they see it immediately. And I'm like, why do you not see that this could work for you too, just as well as it works
Right.
for them? Anyway, that's neither here nor there. We'll move on. All right, I want to get into some actual breaches because we did promise the good people we would discuss some of those. And next, we're going to get into board expectations versus reality. So, where our incident response plans failed. Again, what protections we thought we had versus what actually met the meat when it started hitting the fan. So, So everyone pick your favorite, and I am going to go in order. I'm going to start with Matt Harris because I can tell he's chomping at the bit. He's got like breaches ready. So we're going to cover your favorite breach really, really quickly, start to finish, kind of what we saw, what we think happened, what they said happened, and then we can kind of go into its impact and its effect on not only its customers and its org, but the community. So Matt, pick your fave and let's go.
Oh man, there's way too many. But
So many.
so I know. Well, I'm thinking actually more breach of trust. So going
Okay.
through looking at CrowdStrike and Cloudflare, both of those, which sorry if I've stolen
I
somebody's, but
know.
looking at that, it really emphasizes, well, just to kind of explain what it was, CrowdStrike went through, modified one file within, and it crashed everything across the world. So we know fully on that. And then Cloudflare made a small change and basically shut down the internet itself. And so we know that
Remember that
everything
day.
runs off these two. Like we see so much of that. And it really, this is not just for the breaches themselves, but just standard practice, best practice. Change control, change control, change control. Make sure you actually speak with all the shareholders, the owners of that product. Make sure you understand how that change will affect it and have an effective rollback plan. Not something that's going to shut down the entire internet for days or weeks or shut down airports across the damn world just because of an oopsie. I mean,
Feel
so
like we
it's,
all found out who was a crowd customer that day.
yeah, yes. And I mean, I'll be
Sorry.
honest,
Sorry to throw pain on everyone's trauma.
no, no, I mean, their Falcon Complete system, it's a good system, but they have had a few outages over them last little bit. So there are still some issues that need to be addressed, but in the end, everybody just follow that process. Go back to the
Yeah.
basics. And that's
So
critical. We forget that.
we
Well,
forget
with
that.
Yeah.
I'm going to call it an unsung hero of the industry, the CIS first 20 controls. Okay, there's a first six and then then a second 20. If everyone was doing the CIS, I'm gonna be super liberal and say first six. If you're just doing the first six well, 90% of the stuff I'm going to attempt as a threat actor does not work. But none of you are doing it well. You don't have full asset inventory. You don't have
Yep.
full identity and access inventory. You don't have change management. And if you do have patch management, it's just that we automatically update patches every Tuesday, right? Patch Tuesday. If you work with sensitive systems or large enterprise systems, you can't do that. You got to roll out your patches iteratively and test them. You got to see how certain legacy systems respond. You got to be very, very firm on that before you roll it out
Yep.
everywhere, because as we've seen, rolling it back everywhere is really, really inconvenient. I
Yep.
do agree with you. Do the CIS first six, all of you, please. All right, we're gonna go to Matthew
okay, I
Rosenquist
want to
next.
jump in here because Matt brought up, two great ones, right? You've got CrowdStrike, you've got, and they really showed is the fragility of the system that we have and the dependencies that we have. When you had CrowdStrike essentially bring down 8.5 million devices, right? And you had Cloudflare and you had all these
I
different
love you,
networks
CrowdStrike.
that
We're sorry. These are the
Yeah.
best.
yeah,
Sorry.
you
My
had
bad.
this this huge no, but what it did is it made the industry take a step back. It actually made Microsoft think, hey, maybe we need to redesign our operating system and put some barriers around this because we're overly trusting and relying security vendors, right? And the same holds true with cloud vendors. If something goes out, it's all the dominoes fall. So, that has not gone unnoticed by the security community, by the IT community, and now elevating up to the C-suite, the CEO, and the board, right? And regulators are taking note as well. They're
God, he
figuring
said
out,
the B
okay, how do
word.
we regulate this? And so it has a ripple effect. So I love his picks because you're talking about not only billions of dollars of impact, right, across every critical infrastructure and end user and everything else. You're talking about a fundamental perspective change in what we expect security to be and how we have to rely on our environments more so than we thought. We thought, oh, internet, it's resilient, right? This can't happen. Oh, no, it
No,
can't. How does that
those are just
affect?
someone else's servers, y'all.
Yeah, yes. So I
Still a
love his
server at
picks,
the end
by
of the
the way.
day. All right. Well, I agree with all the points that you've made. And I love his picks too, because it shows how it doesn't necessarily have to start with a threat actor, right? It can be insider threat, it can be benign insider threat, it could be insider negligence, it can be supply chain. There are all kinds of things that do result in breaches. And that kind of goes into what do we constitute as a breach? We kind of talked about this earlier. Is a breach considered a breach if the board says you violated our trust or you violated our, and any breach of trust is a breach to us, or is it only a breach if it qualifies as an event that became an incident that became a breach? It kind of goes, there's a lot of nuance there, but I do love Matt's examples for those reasons. They got a lot of attention, but they could have been prevented. All right. What's your favorite breach though, Matthew?
So I'm going to pivot a little bit, and I'm going to look back at the kind of nation states and some of the big attacks, and they went
Yep.
after finances, right?
Yeah, they
We
did.
saw the biggest financial hack ever in Bybit. For those who don't know it, Bybit is a crypto exchange, and so for context, a lot of times when we look at impacts, right, and when we look at, CrowdStrike, oh, it was $8 billion, it's kind of an estimate. It's a fuzzy number, right? It's
They
not
said it
okay.
costs as
Okay,
much.
what
Who's
did it
they?
cost
Where did that come from?
contractors to bring
How
it
do you
up?
know?
But we already paid them. What was lost sales? What was brand impact? Let's throw some numbers together, right? It becomes fuzzy. But when we talk about like the buyback hack, that was almost $1.5 billion taken away, right?
A
And
lot of
we saw North Korean attackers, and they love stealing money, right? Into that benefits them getting around sanctions, hard currency for all the political things that they need. But $1.5 billion stolen from a single company in a single attack. Now, as we rely more on digital tools and services and our finances and everything else, this becomes possible. And it was the biggest single attack that we've seen. And when we look at Coinbase was another one in the crypto space, right? We had a data breach, 70,000 users, and that data was then used for social engineering attacks. And all this came from insiders, right? A contractor was paid off to basically give the data. And so
Oh, you
when
can
we
bet on
look,
humans every time. Humans are my favorite method of
yeah,
bypass.
yeah, insider threats. So, we start looking at the different critical infrastructures and how they're being targeted. It's not, I'm holding up a bank and stealing $20,000 in cash. We're talking orders of magnitude, many, many, many orders of magnitude. I work
Yeah.
with law enforcement a lot, and every law enforcement agency wants their career bust. And you talk to FBI or you talk to DEA, and a couple of decades ago, that's a 20 or $50,000 bust, right? You bust somebody with that amount of money, that's your career bust. Now
Yeah.
it's in the millions or
Chump change.
billions of
That's chump change.
dollars. The scale has changed,
Yeah, I'm pretty sure
and we often
$20,000 is
don't
a
see that.
rounding error for Wiz. You know what I mean? They're not even gonna
Yes.
know it. Like, oh no. And that kind of goes into like breach mentality, right? A lot of orgs choose not to try and mitigate against everything possible happening because they're like, you know what? If one or two bad things happen, we could survive it. We could pay the fees and the fines and recover and it'll be fine. So that's going to be our risk appetite. And I'm like, "Oh, I'm just going to quit."
Yeah. Well, at
But it's
these figures, it changes the board perception because it now elevates to the board because it becomes
yeah,
material.
these are
You don't get
figures
to
so
hide your
big they can take
cybersecurity
down an
under IT,
institution. Yeah,
right? They're presenting to the board because it's material impact to the shareholders, to the investors. And that
yeah.
again fundamentally changes our game on the defensive side because our leadership has to be able to represent that and be ahead of it in the discussions.
Agreed. Agreed. And it starts with procurement. Don't accept anything made by the lowest bidder. It's easy. Okay. So Shane, last but certainly not least, sir.
Okay. All right. So I have
On the red
two.
team, I got you a little spicy. A little spicy.
I have two, right? And that is maybe quite well known, hopefully. One of them is the Salesforce incident, and the other one is an incident involving an attack on an AI LLM.
I feel like this collective
So
panel is going to be blacklisted. We're going to have so many vendors coming at us in the comments, but continue. I love it.
All
I'm
right.
ready.
So,
I'm ready for the
so this is
engagement.
the interesting one, which perhaps we haven't discussed as much as we should have. Meryl, you mentioned it in passing earlier. that it's not just AI helps attackers, AI can be part of the attack surface. So, for example, the Microsoft zero-click prompt injection attack in
Oh man,
2025, right? So,
because
so the
Microsoft
attackers
isn't going to
figured
sponsor
out
these anytime soon.
a low interaction, pretty straightforward prompt injection attack against Microsoft Copilot. So, for context, Microsoft Copilot has been aggressively promoted by Microsoft all over the world, including here in India and Southeast Asia, where I usually do most of
It
my
was
work.
involuntarily added to my browser. I didn't need
Right,
to
right,
approve that.
yeah.
It just
So
showed up.
and it integrates with all of the Microsoft services very helpfully, Microsoft Office applications, Microsoft Email, Microsoft Browser, Edge, etc., etc. So I was just waiting for the day when somebody would figure out a prompt injection attack, which would allow unauthenticated data exfiltration at scale, and that's exactly what happened with was I think it was codenamed Echo Leaks. I mean, every company that does the investigation has a certain style of nomenclature for all of the attacks that they investigate. So I think I don't know who called it Echo Leaks, but I like the word. So this was this. So this was a slightly non-traditional modern attack in a sense because it involves a modern AI LLM, very popular one, Microsoft Copilot. So this was interesting to me just for from the perspective of novelty, right? Because it hasn't really happened at scale earlier, and we should expect to see more of these attacks because even to the AI companies themselves, these LLMs and the way they interface with the real world is still through prompts is still largely a black box, and they are discovering prompt injection techniques even as we speak. So it's just a matter of who gets there first. The second one is the Salesforce. So where it was a blend of, so it wasn't really Salesforce that was the target, but it was the customer organizations in their CRM. So basically the OAuth tokens. So essentially, for example, I think it was the OAuth abuse here, where attackers abused third-party OAuth credentials tokens in the Drift integration with Salesforce application, and they were able to extract these tokens, and then they were able to use these tokens to harvest information from the CRM database about these organizations, and then that potentially could lead them to downstream targets. So this was, in a way, it could be I guess it could be considered supply chain attack because it leveraged Salesforce just to get to a third set of targets. So I think these two are quite interesting to me because they kind of represent it not necessarily uses AI to I'm not suggesting that artificial intelligence techniques were used to enable either the full kill chain or parts of the kill chain in here. But it's just interesting to me in 2025. I think these were the ones I yeah, it caught my attention.
No, it's true. And honestly, API security is not doing well, y'all. API security, I wouldn't say it's in the dark ages, but it's definitely behind where other modern enterprise controls have gotten. And the more threat actors see AI show up everywhere, I feel like it's a hammer looking for a nail right now. I feel like we're all just plugging it in and the threat actors are going, yay, more attack surface. Nom 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 nom. And it's all API based. I love that for me. And we're just rushing to plug it into everything because we think it's going to be
And
helpful. But unless it adds a true function, just don't take the risk right now. You don't need to. And honestly, put the foundations in place first. Have
And
that
Merrill, one
oversight
more,
and
sorry,
governing.
sorry to interject, but I think there's
Yeah.
something else that. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm an advisor to several organizations, critical sector organizations. One of them is the Tata Group here in India. So I'm an advisor, independent advisor to Tata Group as well as FireCompass. And Tata Group owns Jaguar Land Rover. And I think Matthew and me were discussing this earlier. So that's a pretty interesting incident as well, because you have someone who is so large and so prestigious from the perspective of the Indian government that there were interventions at the highest level in terms of trying to not just do the initial damage containment but also the strategic and long-term recovery for Jaguar Land Rover, the reputation, credibility, and all of that. And as you know, Jaguar Land Rover is based in the UK, but it's wholly owned by the Tata Group. So that's an interesting. I don't want to talk about the actual typology of the attack because that's fairly well publicized, but it was a pretty devastating attack, and the signs are that they still haven't fully recovered yet. They're still in the remediation recovery phase, several months down the line, or almost a year now. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
it's interesting because the
Matthew.
impact was so profound,
Yeah.
right? You had to have government come in to help that sector. It
Yeah.
wasn't just Jaguar Land Rover, right? Or Marks and Spencer's another one, right? But it was all their supply chains. Their suppliers were getting impacted because the primary attack target was down and the money stopped flowing. And so you start having this ripple effect throughout a sector. And we're seeing, attacks, and we knew this was coming, right? It's not going to go away. We're going to see this in the future because again, everything is so connected between these different companies and sectors. So I think it's a wake-up call. And I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
it's also interesting they didn't choose to pay, and it was certainly more costly to them to recover than to pay the ransom. But it's
Yes.
Sure.
absolutely the right thing to do. And we're seeing more and more companies make that decision, right? Boards and executives going, we don't want to pay, right? There is too much of a consequence from a brand, and it really doesn't give us much anyway, right? We're going to get attacked again. So we need to put a stake in the ground. And that again changes the expectations of cybersecurity leadership. Not only do you have to prevent a lot, but you have to have the resilience to be able to come back when something bad does break. How fast can you get back up and running?
Yeah. I agree. And that's another pillar of resilience that often gets ignored. Again, oh, well, we'll just thwart the bad thing from happening 10 ways to Sunday, but we only have one means of recovery. It's like, ooh, that's not a good strategy.
And we never practiced it.
Don't forget about your business continuity professionals, people. They're important, okay? They're the ones who are going to save you. All right, we're coming up short on time. We do want to leave some time for questions. So I think we're going to skip right to the end because you guys segued us so beautifully into blind spots by sector. So we've got quite a few sectors represented today. We've got healthcare, we've got government, we've got enterprise, and then we've got connective tissue and red teaming. So I guess the one last thing I'd love to know is kind of across every breach that we've mentioned, the common failure often wasn't technology, right? It was either believing the impact would be smaller than it was, or it was unique channels to initial access. So, what is one blind spot in each of your sectors that attackers love and that everyone assumes is going to be well covered, but it continues to be a blind spot that threat actors abuse? I would just love to know. And then we'll see if there's any questions. And if not, I've got a fun way to suck up the rest of the time. All right, Matthew Rosenquist, you reacted biggest. You get to go first.
Okay, so you had already mentioned this, right? When we talk about APIs, well, APIs don't work really well with the new agentic AI systems. So we have this new framework, this new protocol, MCPs, Model Context Protocol, and that will essentially supplant APIs. And if you look at the protocol, it is designed exactly for functionality. And if you're an attacker, it does everything you would want it to do. It self-announces itself. It has access. It
That's dirty
tells
to
you
me.
how to use it,
Oh
right?
my
It
God.
tells you what access it has. It has all of this. And so we're seeing legacy
Beautiful. Why have you never
platforms,
heard of this? I'm gonna go
right?
hack one of them
Legacy
immediately.
platforms moving towards this to enable agentic systems, agent-based AI systems to have access and to spawn children agents within their environment. So it helps the attackers, it bypasses our current controls. And when we look at AI and this massive embrace of every company wants to use AI, right? The value of every AI system is predicated on the access it has to sensitive data and systems. So we're going to expose our most sensitive data and systems. Why? Because we want the most valuable AI. Now we're going to have MCPs on the front end of that to allow the attackers to gain access. So the worries that you have with APIs, multiply it by 1,000, and that's what we're moving into with
That's
MCPs and
significant.
enabling AI to access everything
Well,
behind
I
our
know what
firewall.
rabbit hole I'm going down after this phone call. Thank you for that. I'm so excited. But also, damn, nice. Okay, Sachin, sir, what
Um,
about you?
Actually, I would concur completely with Matthew. In fact, I would probably have said something similar, but therefore I'm going to say something different now. But and adding on to what Matthew just said, it's maybe perhaps it's not answering to the theme of the question though. But I think it's important to note that. So I can't reveal much about my government work, but I can tell you that that is the exact model that we are developing certain systems on, which use MCP as a primary method of interacting with the physical world, so to speak. So our offensive agentic AI framework precisely uses MCP as a main, I would say, class of techniques to interact with other systems for attack uh, kill chain, as basically attack tool chain development. So everything I spoke about earlier that adversaries have started to leverage and build upon is things we're doing, and it uses MCP as well, but in a totally in a very different way, but it essentially achieves the same things. And you're exactly right, Matthew. It's extremely easy to work with MCP protocols, MCP servers. There's a lot of open source community out there that are developing their own, which makes it even easier, and the barrier to entry is even lower. So this is not really
All right.
answering your question, Merrill, but I just wanted to give the flip side of it is that, yeah.
I love it. I love it. All right. Well, you heard it here first. The next attack surface, MCPs, next webinar coming soon. The 15 people here heard it first. We're all gonna go out and start hacking MCPs and be the world's foremost experts on it now. I love learning new things. You guys just taught me something new. See, no matter how long you've been here, you will always find something you didn't know. I love that. All right, Matt Harris, bring us home, and then we'll take some questions from the crowd.
Sure. So looking at healthcare itself, just to kind of bring it back, we've got the Aflac breach, which, I mean, that looks at finance and Witham Healthcare itself. We see the commonality between shared user accounts, which is the bane of all of our existence based off of the legacy, um, products we are forced to go through and use. So looking at which I specialize in dental. So many of our systems are 10, 20 years old based off of how they were actually built. So DSOs out there cringe completely because we all know that. And many of them use those shared user accounts to go through to actually operate more streamlined process and operate more efficiently. But that was one of the exploits during, or potentially one of the exploits during this, with a combination of phishing, which would be social engineering phishing, social engineering, then help desk manipulation to then look at a lateral movement. So things along those lines are start off with your process, the actual service desk follows, to then go get rid of the damn shared user accounts. Everybody needs their own logging. I mean, when you look at them, HIPAA, you've actually got to be able to tie it back to one particular individual performed this task. Well, when
Yeah.
everybody's using user one, then who is user one? Well,
You have no
user
attribution. You
no
have
one
no
knows.
correlation.
And so when they have it stuck to their monitor as here's the password, it's just a security nightmare. So with so much of this, we've been talking about so many different, I mean, types of attacks, technical attacks themselves, but just look at the basics. If we, just like you mentioned, Merrill, look at CIS, the first six, just going through that, we don't all do that. If we did that, that's going to go through to stop quite a bit. And just using best practice, it's simple, easier said than done. And
Definitely.
putting it into practice, that's an absolute nightmare. But it's one of those that, which I know that I've seen several questions, which I know we'll get to, but going through, I mean, that's one big sales point to the board is try to go through and actually spin that to where, look, we can go through to optimize your process, but let's have just a little bit of hybrid solution to go through and actually push that forward. And
Agreed.
so that's going to be, which I know we'll get into more of these questions. So
Yeah.
I'll toss it back
It's
to
where
you.
tools and automations try to come in and save us, but then
Yeah.
they also end up being a law of diminishing returns because they don't
Yep.
like automate and furnish the right thing. Anyway, we'll get in there. Thank you so much for that point. We do have some great questions from the audience, ones that I'm really excited to ask, but we have 5 and 10 minutes left. So we're going to keep 30-second answers so we can all weigh in. So think of them as a rapid fire answer. We can always do follow-on content or follow-on posts to answer these more in depth. But just for purposes of live here on the call. Okay, number 1, across the biggest breaches, what was the most repeatable failure pattern you saw? Identity, third-party SaaS, misconfiguration, weak detection, and why do we think it kept showing up? I'm just gonna go in order. So I'm gonna go Matt first, then Sachin, and then Matthew.
Yeah, so all are true. Like they're all have been exploited. And it's just because we are creatures of habit. We continue to do the same things over and over, thinking that something will change. And unfortunately, until we break that habit, we're not going to be able to go through and change it.
So it's humans. All right, Sachin, you next.
Well, along with the obvious suspects in terms of technical vectors like, third-party SaaS integrations, APIs, and other misconfigurations, I think the biggest contributor to cyber attacks, and that this remains so in 2025 that I've seen either from both offensive and from a DFIR perspective, is human fallibility. And I think that continues to remain one of the primary. It's basically identity abuse. So it's essentially impersonation, leveraging people, identities and credentials associated with those identities, and then using those to either get initial access or propagate access to the network. I think that's something that I've seen as a common theme in a large majority of the attacks. So human fallibility.
Definitely. Definitely. Yeah. All right, Matthew.
It's the basics. I know it's a bland answer, but
Yeah.
it's really doing those security basics we all know we should be doing, but we're failing
It's
at
not
them.
sexy. No one wants to do
It
it. They don't
isn't
want to
sexy.
do it.
Okay. You want a
They want to
sexy
do
one here?
logistic AI. Yeah.
So beyond the
Okay.
basics, we are always trying to fight yesterday's battles, right? And so we will never catch up. We will never get ahead. We have to turn and see what's coming at us. So as long as we lack the strategic thinking to look forward and are only looking back, we will always play the helpless victim.
Yeah, and I'm going to give my answer in two parts. I would say for getting initial access, for getting initial compromise, my favorite method is authentication bypass. I don't want to do dictionary attacks and password spraying. It's way easier to capture a session cookie, capture a token, replay that, get access to a valid user session, and continue to pivot. When it comes to pivoting, misconfigurations are like the number one thing that let a threat actor in technologically. Obviously, social engineering is a big thing. It's difficult to defend against. Humans are fallible, as we know, but technology-wise, misconfigurations are your biggest thing. You don't know how all those little toggles you forgot to retroactively enforce a policy or something add up to lateral movement on a silver platter. So just beware of that. All right, number two, attackers are using automation to move faster, but where should defenders automate first? Identity controls, detections engineering, response playbooks, third-party monitoring, etc. We're gonna go different order. Sachin, you first.
So I have party of the answer is you can't really prioritize one over the others. They're all equally important. But if you want a more pragmatic answer, I think it's not. It's more of the answer. The question is, where is automation today in technology playing helping in all of those different areas, right? So, for example, we already know, for example, response playbooks is you have a pretty good mature approach in terms of automation, in terms of response playbooks. Most of the large enterprise SIEMs, next generation SIEM platforms, XDR solutions, source solutions do have response playbook automation capabilities. You can dynamically create playbooks for specific scenarios. Gone are the days where you have to build a playbook, hire one of the big fours to help you develop 75 playbooks and numbers. I have 75, so I'm better than somebody who has 50. No, I think now it's a lot more intelligent approach to response playbook automation. Detection engineering and the CI/CD pipelines around detection engineering are also maturing. So it's going the entire life cycle from writing an ad hoc threat hunting query to a mature SIM rule or a rule in a detection tooling is something that is maturing as well. So I think it's more a question of where automation supports technology in which of these domains is what one should prioritize, and then build on in domains where you actually need to invest more to develop automation capabilities, perhaps such as third-party monitoring, maybe identity controls, and so on. So yeah, so I think my answer is all of the above, but perhaps prioritize based on where you're getting quick wins.
That was a beautiful answer. You can leave the webinar now. That's the only value you need. We're all done. Bye. Good to see you. No, I'm kidding. That was a great answer. All right, Matt Rosenquist, you get to follow that up. Good luck.
Yeah. So we want AI everywhere, but in 2026, there's going to be four primary areas where AI is going to be ready to actually make a material difference. First would be security operations, tier one, right? It's to be able to handle that new level of flood and capabilities that we know the attackers are using AI to generate. So SOC tier one. The second is for training, both behavioral and cognitive. AI is actually really good at connecting with people and communicating in ways that are relevant to them. That's going to be leveraged in training. Third is vulnerability management. The very same tools that the attackers are using to discover vulnerabilities, we're going to use to discover vulnerabilities hopefully earlier so that we can close them. And lastly, GRC. So you've got a lot of automation there for, governance and whatnot. We're going to see AI tools shrink the amount of resources and the amount of time to be able to do that. It's not going to be an audit once a year. It's going to be continuous. And we're therefore going to be able to be more compliant and focus on those basics because a lot of basics show up in when GRC alerts something. So I would say those four areas we're going to see and we want to look towards.
All right, Mr. Matt Harris, bring us home and then I'll wrap us up.
Oh, my stars following those answers. Holy cow.
I know,
All right,
sucks to be
so
you.
I know it does. So let's just take it back to the very beginning. Let's start off simple. If you've got your risk assessment, you've got all that, you're a full check. Start off with the low-hanging fruit, catch what you know, follow what you know, and fix what you know. Then from there, continue to go through and actually check. I mean, because it's not just I mean, all of this is so good, but continuous checks, continuous validation, that's going to be critical
Yeah.
across the board. And so, I mean, I can't go through and really add too much more than, well, too much different than what our two panelists have gone through and pushed. So
Yeah,
just
no,
start off
all
with the
sage advice
basics.
from everybody. It's one of those things where we tell you to turn on all the things everywhere, you get overwhelmed. We say start fixing better things. You're like, how? I know that it can seem like non-helpful advice, but it truly is do the basics first. Also, I just feel like defenders are treating threat actors like they're still only attacking one time at a time. They're attacking in single point in time campaigns, and that's no longer true. We don't truly do anything continuous. We do it on demand here in security. We like to think it's continuous, but unless it's kicking off on a recurring basis by itself, it's truly not. It's truly
Right.
on demand. But threat actors are launching continuous campaigns, scripts that can continually try and hit you and keep scanning your ports and keep looking for entry access methods. So it's tired advice, but please do the basics. Please go out there and start adapting quicker than they are adapting. Okay, so we're going to stay on to answer the last three questions. Looks like we're able to. If any of our panelists are not, we totally understand. Thank you for your time today. Thank you for being here with us to hear about 2025 breaches and our commentary on the trends and impacts. If you want to stay for the last three questions, please totally feel free. If you do have to leave, we understand. Otherwise, I'm Merrill with FireCompass, and I will let all the gentlemen say goodbye to you as well.
Y'all have a good one.
Cheers all.
Bye.
Okay. Well, I guess we can, anyone who wants to leave there can leave. Okay. So the third question, and I do want to give Sachin to answer number four as well, because I didn't think we'd have a response for that, but I'm glad we've got someone with insight. So question three, if the board asks, are we safer today than last year? What 2 to 3 measures would you show to reflect real breach readiness and not just compliance? I'm going to take this one first from a red team perspective. So we've seen this shift in the industry everywhere. We're all moving away from traditional vulnerability management. We all say it's broken. I just think that we've outgrown it. It's no longer addressing the needs that we have with modern day attack surfaces. So to me, it would be to show how you are fixing exposures farther upstream that lead to downstream impacts. So although compromising a domain admin and exfiltrating data, those are going to turn up as your 10.0s, and no matter what tool you use, yes, those are objectively bad. But rather than fixing 7 10.0s and ignoring everything that came before it, why don't you go to the one gateway vulnerability? Go to the one way up here that let me forced rogue authentication via SMB or something dumb that let everything else be possible. You can show, look, I didn't spend all this time fixing these 15 things. I fixed this one thing for this impact. We are this much percentage safer. To me, that's a powerful metric, but I've never been on a board, so I can't really comment if they're going to respect that kind of thing, but that's just how I feel. We'll go to Matt Harris next.
Sure. So just kind of actually pivoting off of that, we can look at something just as simple as keeping things up to date. I mean, just as I mentioned, keep going back to the basics. Like we've got where the Fortinet FortiGate hack that's actually gone through and exposed quite a bit with it with our 0 days that are actually out there. Just keep things up to date. You can look at different sales points to your board as we've completed this many vulnerabilities. Here's how many we've got outstanding. If this is exploited, here's how much it's going to cost. And so going through to actually push that forward, because unfortunately, secure networks, secure infrastructure, those are expensive. But to go through and actually push that through, you've got to have that sales point of combining the actual exploit with how much that's going to cost when it's exploited.
The impact. Yeah,
Mhm.
definitely. By the way, I have not been on a single customer call in any of the pen testing services or automation tools that I've worked at where anyone was able to accurately tell us their scope. We're usually reverse educating on what the scope actually is and how many assets you have. So if anyone can show up to a customer call with me with accurate inventory counts, you will get a significant discount or a gold star or something, because that is how little of the basics we're doing. No customer who's come to me has that information. And honestly, even if they had the tools, I don't know if those would be accurate. All right, we're going to go to Matthew Rosenquist next, and then we'll go to Sachin. And then we're going to go to question number 4.
So let me give a contrarian point of view.
Oh, please, I'd love those.
Um, and let me caveat this. So I advise a lot of boards and a lot of CEOs and a lot of CISOs. If you're going into your board or your CEO and saying, I've got these vulnerabilities and they're, CVSS rated 10, and that's what we're going to focus on, you're probably going to fail. Okay,
Yeah.
now here's the reason why.
CVSS
You
suck.
actually need to understand what's most important to you, to your
You.
organization.
Not to everybody all at once.
Vulnerability management isn't ranking based on CVSS. You need to understand how those impact. Well, which ones are targeting your critical revenue? I was working with a client and they had this whole, our focus on cybersecurity is to take down vulnerabilities. We start at the highest CVSS and go down. And the
Boom.
reality is, right, when we looked at it, you had some critical ones, but they were only impacting systems and products that were generating about 2% of the revenue. Where you had moderate and a couple of highs that were actually in products that were generating over 80% of the revenue. And so when I challenged them and said, wait a second, you're going to spend all your time on something that at max can only take out 2% of your revenue, and you're going to deprioritize the vulnerabilities that contribute to 80% of your revenue. And the board is like, well, that's crazy. Why would we do this? And they're
Why
looking at
would we do that?
the CISO going, this is how you prioritize? This is your strategy? Okay, leading cybersecurity by vulnerability, knocking vulnerabilities down blindly just based on some rating is the strategy of 10 years ago. Again,
Yeah,
this
that's like
is
throwing a dart
doing
at the
what
miter
worked 10
matrix and
years
praying.
ago. So you need to look forward. You need to have better prioritization. Who's attacking you? What methods? What are they going to go after? Focus on that. Stop trying to defend everything equally, right? You will fail.
If you're defending
Prioritize,
against
understand your
everything,
enemy, understand yourself.
yeah.
Sun Tzu's talked about this thousands of years ago. Learn,
And
people. Come on, we need to be better.
and I can't believe we have to keep saying this, because we all know that CVSS scores, you guys, CVSS scores are like their dating profile out there in the wild. If you had nothing around it, this is how bad it is. That doesn't mean anything the second it meets your environment. Your environment has unique things to it: firewalls, controls, EDR, policies, etc. So something that's a 9.8 for someone else isn't going to be a 9.8 for you. But I feel like we saw a transition in this. We saw people stop just saying what's the most easiest thing we're subject to, what you're alluding to. They started saying, what is the easiest or most critical thing you can attempt on our tier 0 assets? But then we need to take it a step farther. And Matt Harris alluded to this earlier. And if you're not below me, this is going to look really weird on the recording, but I hope you are.
I don't know.
Instead, what we need to be doing is asking ourselves what the exposures are. So he said this earlier, not every CVE is exploitable. If you only hunt CVEs, again, you're doing non-value added security theater. You need to hunt the exposures that lead to actual impact. What they both said cobbled together. Take a real valid exposure that's reachable, that's not just affecting 2% of your assets. see if it's actually exposed, if it's exposed and exploitable, and what that downstream impact is. If you have two that are exploitable and reachable, but one's impact stops here and one's impact stops at DA, that's the one you focus on. You don't just focus on that. That's how findings go to a backlog to die or turn 2 or 3, in my opinion. All right, Sachin, you next, sir.
All right. So here are a few things that I try to convey when I advise boards, or rather when I advise those that report to boards, because the boards have expectations, and frequently their expectations are not satisfied, and there's a lot of iterative changes and refinements that they ask for, and they simply don't seem to get it. So here, some of the things that I've kind of learned through my own experience is number one, show adversary-based outcomes, not control coverage, because typically the conversation starts with, we comply with XYZ regulatory requirements and demands, right? Or X% of our controls are implemented, Y% remain to be implemented, and they cannot be implemented because of these reasons. Replace that with, here is what a real attacker could achieve, right? This quarter, and how fast we stop them. So how can you do that? You can show, for example, the top 5 attack paths that are currently viable, given what Merrill just said, despite all our control frameworks and policies and enforcement mechanisms. These are the 5 attack paths that still remain viable from an adversary perspective. And if successful, this is the business impact. And how where the attack was detected, whether the attack was detected, whether it was delayed, and whether it was stopped. And where it was not is equally important, because frequently we leave out the bad news, that there are, that certain attacks were not stopped. The second one is to demonstrate detection capability under live attack conditions, not just simply assurances. So leverage BAS, CART, purple teaming, and other techniques where so you're demonstrating real world impact and not simply a theoretical, based on your understanding of the controls and how they may have been implemented. And then also distinguish between those attacks or TTPs that were detected deterministically versus those that required some level of manual or human intervention, and those that were not detected. That split is also very important because it gives the board an assurance that where the organization is doing well, where things can be automated, and where things cannot be, and which are the blind spots still. Some of the other things I believe are, I think yeah. So I guess the theme here, which kind of underpins the recommendation that I had, was around less theory and more demonstrable value. Not simply empty assurances, but assurances that are defensible and backed by real data from within the organization, which is contextual.
Defensible, evidence-backed proof on why you spent your time
Right.
on the things you spent your
Right.
time on.
And then
Either,
articulated
yeah.
in a manner and language and at a level of abstraction that is relevant and compatible with the board of director audience. Because
True.
frequently they present a lot of technical data, and it might actually meet the very specific needs of the board, but they don't understand it as such because they have a very different way of looking at the same information. And I think one needs, so I call it board empathy. One needs to exercise board empathy and then translate what you just have into
If you're
something.
on the board or pandering to the board, which one?
So yeah, so I think the language, the level of abstraction, the language with which you articulate it, and the way you present it, board of directors tend to be very intuitive. I've seen most of them are very visual in their, the way they represent information. They like to see dashboards and pictures, yes, but not the irrelevant data, something that actually truly matters to them.
I feel like something we do wrong when we're speaking to boards is we take the efficacy of and potency of everything we do technically and we try to dumb it down for them because a lot of boards aren't technical. So we start trying to just speak in risk and speak in these subjective, abstract terms when we have done so much metric-driven work. So my advice to all of you is to learn how to be technical liaisons, learn how to give impact to what you do without watering down its efficacy. Because if you're constantly defending your decisions, they've lost the plot. You haven't kept the narrative. So you do have to make it poignant and relevant for them, but you do need to leave the impact and the spikes and the teeth on the work that you're doing. Otherwise, it looks like you're doing security theater, and then you look like a cost center. You don't look like you're reducing attack surface. Okay, we do have to move on. I want to try and wrap this up in the next 5 to 6 minutes. Okay, question 4. In breach investigations, what are the top telemetry or log sources that consistently decide speed to truth in the first 24 hours? And what do most orgs still not have wired correctly? I think Sachin wanted to take point on this one.
Okay, sorry to go again, but I do have a strong point on
Oh,
this one. I think it's best encapsulated in 3 statements I can make. Number one, breaches don't fail at detection; they actually fail at interpretation. And what do I mean by that? So in almost every investigation that I've done as it now, as speaking as a DFIR, experienced DFIR analyst in my past life, in the past few years, almost every single incident, in retrospect, postmortem analysis showed that almost all the telemetry was present. It was there. But what was missing was context. And without the context, the telemetry on its own did not make much sense, or did not have much investigative or analytical value. So the telemetry plus the context would allow you to come quickly at the truth in terms of what was going on, when, what, where, how, all of those things. The response speed now matters more than the response depth. So I think that's another principle that I think DFIR analysts now have to start to grapple with, is the new reality with AI, augmented approaches to offensive security. Things that would take maybe days or weeks to accomplish from an adversary perspective now happen in minutes. So if you are taking too long to do the various investigation, analysis, interpretation, and then conclusions in different stages of the attack chain, your ability to neutralize the threat in the environment will quickly diminish, because you're not just simply not going to be as fast as the adversary. And I think because of the because unlike traditional attacks, maybe a decade ago, or even as early as recently as 5 years ago, most of the attacks involved real malware infecting servers and endpoints. So disk and memory forensics was very important. So all of us learned that when we were doing DFIR. But now we have to do identity and cloud and SaaS application and custom application forensics. So having that telemetry is or logs is very important, and most organizations miss out on that because they felt that, look, we have EDR, we have antivirus, we have next generation antivirus, we have web proxies, we have different DLP agents sitting on my endpoints and servers. That alone is not sufficient anymore, and I think you need to have logs and telemetry from other sources as well. And the last one is something I truly believe in, is that the attacker, it has the ability, using various technical mechanisms and techniques and methods, to alter the perception of what is real and what is not real on an endpoint or a server. But the network never lies. So having network telemetry, whether it is an dedicated NTA solution like maybe extra hop or dark trace or something similar, or simply network firewalls, having once the manifest activity on an endpoint or server leaves the domain of the server or endpoint and moves in on the wire, the attacker has little or no control over it. So that's why I say the network never lies. So if you're able to detect attacks on the wire, and then correlate those attacks with what was happening on the endpoints or servers. And again, going back to Locard's principle, every contact leaves a trace. So no matter how good the attacker is. So having the network telemetry alongside your host and endpoint based forensics is also very important. But most of the
I
time,
agree.
for logistical or cost reasons, most organizations do not have granular, low-level network visibility in terms of having the telemetry in the SIEM or any other similar solution for correlation.
Agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Also, they usually call the red team and say, get in here and help us investigate. We go, what do you want us to look at? I don't know how I'm supposed to help. Okay, we're going to do this last one rapid fire. It's going to be in 2 parts. So we're going to do the first part first, and 3 to 5 word answer only. Super quick answer. Okay. So what are the highest leverage 2026 priorities that shrink blast radius? Examples: privilege, segmentation, data access, IR muscle memory, etc. We're gonna go Matt, Sachin, Matthew. So Matt, biggest thing you can do to reduce blast radius. Go.
Privilege segmentation. I'm actually going to go through and take that one. So
Nice.
that would be what I would advise because that's one of the most leverage points.
Okay, Sachin.
I concur almost exactly with Matt, actually. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's going to be a privilege, identity privileges, and network level segmentation. If the question was specifically on blast radius.
Yeah, specifically on blast radius. All right,
Okay,
Matthew.
these two, yeah.
I think you need to look forward, right? Keep doing everything you're doing with segmentation and all that, but you need to look at the biggest technology and how it's all changing. So get your arms around AI, because if you think blast radius was bad last year, stand by.
Oh, baby. I'm going to say know what your most business critical functions are. I used to work for an insurance firm. I said, raise your hand if you think you're the most important department. Everyone, including security, raised their hand. They were all wrong. The most important department was claims. The only people I'm worried about getting back online in the event of an outage is claims. If we can't pay people's claims, we are dead in the water. That's it. So know who your critical function is, protect those systems. All right, second part. Again, rapid fire. What should CISO stop doing because it burns time without moving the risk? Matt again.
Oh, crud. Um, what should CISO stop doing? Okay.
Stop doing it today. It's a cost center. It
Uh,
sucks. It's not moving the needle. Stop it.
Meetings about meetings about meetings. I'm just kidding. But I
You said
mean, although that's true, but it's one of those, I mean, stop looking at it from just a vulnerability perspective, although that is one of the biggest KPIs, but it is one of those that is going to go through and hold you back. I mean, go through, revisit that to your incident response plan, because that's going to actually go through and drive, well, getting back on track.
Love it. Next, Sachin.
I would say in the current in the current context, I think CISOs should stop being tentative on the subject of AI adoption in cybersecurity within the enterprise. Because, like it or not, we do not want to be the ones dilly-dallying, waiting for our, for us to fully understand it, because the adversary is already doing it. And they're increasingly weaponizing artificial intelligence for autonomous execution of attacks and automation and all of that. And if we don't defend ourselves in a similar way, in a complementary manner, again, leveraging, I'm not suggesting that we go all in on AI. I think we should do it in a calibrated way. But I've seen a lot of CISOs not even taking the first step. They are so afraid because the ambiguity leads to lack of understanding. Lack of understanding leads to hesitation. And any hesitation in this space right now is just simply making matters worse. I think that's what I would suggest.
Okay. And Matt Rosenquist.
Stop ignoring strategy, right? It's too easy to degrade down into firefighting and to busy work. Unfortunately, a lot of it is not worth it. And if you don't allocate time to build a strategy, to have a direction, to know where you're going so that you can properly prioritize and allocate your resources, you're probably wasting a lot of them.
Damn, nice. All right, and then my spicy take, because I'm the red teamer, so it's got to be stop doing shelfware. Fully optimize and configure everything you buy. If you're not using it to its fullest capability. Stop limiting your red teams. I don't care if you're worried that the CEO is going to get mad. His desktop is not off limits, legacy systems are not off limits, and private subnets are not off limits. If it's not off limits for China, shouldn't be off limits for red teams. Finally, stop focusing on the number of tickets that are closed. That's not a helpful metric. Instead, you should focus on the amount of assurance we can definitively prove out from our programs. That's why security is not a cost center. That's the end of the webinar. We've had you for such a long time. Thanks for sticking with us. If you did, we appreciate you. We will see you all next time. And gentlemen, thanks so much for joining me today. Your insights were phenomenal.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much, Merrill. This was an amazing panel discussion. Thank you, Merrill, Sachin, Matthew, Matt, for your time today. I think you guys are already way over time. Feel free to leave. Thank you for keeping the sharp and real. Thank you, members, for tuning in today. This is your platform. We hope you gained valuable insights. We will be sharing a highlights brief from this session. We look forward to seeing you in the next one, expected next month in February. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Each of you,
Bye,
thank you
all.
so much for
Good
your
night
time.
and have a nice rest of the day for those in America. Bye-bye.
Absolutely. Good night.
Will
Bye-bye.
do.